Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we are diving into one of the most fascinating intellectual journeys in the history of human thought. We're gonna explore the relationship between scientific methodology and action research. Now, I know those terms may sound academic or highly technical at first, but trust me, this topic actually affects every single one of us. It affects how governments make decisions. It affects how business solve problems. It affects how organizations learn. It affects education. It affects healthcare. It affects leadership. And honestly, it even affects how we make decisions in our personal lives. Because at the center of this entire discussion is one simple but powerful question. How do humans create knowledge? How do we learn from experience? How do we test ideas? And how do we improve systems, organizations, and society itself? In this lecture, we are gonna travel from ancient Greek philosophy all the way to modern systems thinking, organizational learning, complexity theory, and action research. We'll look at philosophers like Socrates, Aristotle, Kant, and peers. We will explore scientific revelations. We will discuss system thinking. We will compare action research and scientific methodology. And most importantly, we will connect these ideas to the real world in a way that makes sense for everyone. Whether you are a student, researcher, doctor, learner, manager, entrepreneur, educator, policymaker, or simply someone curious about how knowledge evolves, this lecture is for you. So sit back, relax, grab your notebook if you want to take notes, and let's begin our journey into the history, philosophy, and future of scientific methodology and action research. Let's begin with slide number one. On this first slide, we are introducing the core theme of the entire presentation. Scientific methodology and action research are often treated as completely different approaches, but one of the biggest arguments in this lecture is that they actually share deep philosophical roots. Both are built around inquiry, both involve reflection, both involve learning, both involve testing ideas, and both are ultimately trying to solve problems and improve understanding. Scientific methodology, often called the scientific method, is the systemic process of observing phenomena, creating hypotheses, testing ideas, analyzing results, and refining knowledge. Most people associate science with laboratories, experiment, data, and control testing, and that is true. But science is also a way of thinking. It is a disciplined approach to understanding reality. Now, action research is slightly different. Action research combines research with practical action. Instead of studying people from a distance, action research involves people directly in the process of learning and change. In other words, action research is not just about observing reality, it is about participating in reality. That distinction is extremely important. Scientific methodology traditionally tries to minimize outside influence. Action research embraces context, participation, and environmental interaction. Yet, despite these differences, both approaches follow cycles. Both involves observation, both involves reflection, both involves adaptation, and both rely on logic and evidence. One of the most important ideas in this entire presentation is that knowledge creation is relative. Human understanding grows through cycles. We observe, we think, we test, we reflect, we revise. Then we repeat the cycle again. That is how science evolves. That is how organizations learn. That is how scientists progress. And honestly, that is how humans grow personally as well. Think about your own life. Every major lesson you have ever learned probably came through some kind of cycle. You experienced something, you reflected on it, you changed your behavior, you tried again, you improved. That basic learning loop is deeply connected to both scientific methodology and action research. So this presentation is not just about academic theory. It is really about understanding how humans learn, adapt, innovate, and transform systems over time. And that brings us directly into the historical foundation. To understand modern research methods, we need to travel back thousands of years. We need to go back to ancient Greece. Ancient Greek thinkers laid the foundation for Western philosophy, logic, science, and inquiry. Before the Greeks, many societies explained the world primarily through mythology. But Greek philosophers began asking deeper analytical questions. Instead of simply accepting tradition, they asked why, how, what patterns exist, what causes change, how can we know what is true? Those questions transformed human civilization. The Greeks introduced dialectic inquiry. This means learning through questioning, dialogue, and debate. They also developed early forms of inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning moves from observation toward general conclusions. For example, if we observe that fire is hot every time we encounter it, we began forming a general principle that fire produces heat. Deductive reasoning works in the opposite direction. It moves from general principles toward specific conclusions. For example, if all humans are mortal and Socrates is human, then Socrates is mortal. These logical structures become foundational to scientific inquiry. Then, during the Renaissance and scientific revolution, Europe rediscovered and expanded many Greek ideas. Observation became more systematic, measurement became more accurate, experiments became more controlled. Figures like Francis Bacon emphasized empirical observation. Others, like Galileo, used mathematics and experimentation to explain nature phenomena. Gradually, science evolved into a disciplined methodology. Observation led to hypothesis. Hypothesis led to experimentation. Experiments produced evidence. Evidence refined theory. This cyclic process became the foundation of modern science. But eventually, researchers began realizing that human systems are different from physical systems. Organizations, communities, and societies are dynamic. They are influenced by emotions, culture, politics, relationships, values, and context. This realization helped create the conditions for action research. Action research emerged as a more participatory and adaptive form of inquiry. Instead of studying people like isolated objects, researchers became participants in organizational learning and social change. And this shift reflected a broader evaluation and evolution in human thought. We moved from rigid mechanistic models toward systems thinking and contextual understanding. So, when we look at the history of scientific methodology and action research, we are really looking at the evolution of human thinking itself. Now, let's explore the philosophers who shaped these methodologies. This letter focuses on the philosophical foundations of inquiry. And honestly, philosophy is more important than many people realize because every research method is built on assumptions about reality, truth, knowledge, and human understanding. Let's begin with Herodotus. Herodotus believed reality is constantly changing. He famously said that you cannot step into the same river twice. Why? Because the river changes and you change. This philosophy emphasized flux, movement, and transformation. Now compare that to Parmenides. Parmenides argued almost the opposite. He believed reality was stable, permanent, and unchanging. This debate between change and permanence influenced centuries of philosophical thought, and interestingly, we still see this debate today. Some scientific models search for stable laws and predictable structures. Meanwhile, action research and system thinking often emphasize change, adaptation, and dynamic interaction. Next corner, Socrates. Socrates transformed inquiry through questioning. Instead of simply giving answers, he asked probing questions that forced people to think critically. This became known as the Socratic method. And honestly, modern education still uses this approach. Good teachers ask questions that stimulate reflection. That process is deeply connected to action research. Action research encourages participants to reflect on their assumptions, actions, and experiences. Then we have Aristotle. Aristotle emphasized logic, categorization, evidence, and systematic observation. His influence on science was enormous. He helped formalize deductive reasoning, and for centuries, Aristotle's logic shaped scientific inquiry. Now, here is something important. These philosophers were not just debating abstract ideas, they were creating intellectual tools, tools for thinking, tools for inquiry, tools for understanding reality. And those tools become the foundation for both scientific methodology and action research. So, when modern researchers conduct studies, analyze systems, or solve organizational problems, they are participating in a philosophical tradition that began thousands of years ago. That is actually pretty incredible when you think about it. Now we arrive at one of the most transformative periods in human history, the scientific revolution. This era dramatically changed how humans understood knowledge. Before this period, many beliefs were based primarily on authority, tradition, or religious interpretation. But during the scientific revelation, observation and experimentation became central. Researchers began demanding evidence. Measurement became critical. Verification became important. The idea emerged that knowledge could be tested systematically. Francis Bacon played a major role here. Bacon emphasized empirical observation. He argued that researchers should gather data carefully before forming conclusions. This strengthened inductive reasoning. Meanwhile, figures like William Harvey advanced experimentation and accurate observation. Harvey's work on blood circulation demonstrated how scientific experimentation could transform medical knowledge. What makes this period especially important is the development of the scientific inquiry cycle. Observation, hypothesis, prediction, experimentation, analysis, generalization. Then the cycle repeats. This iterative model became the foundation of modern science. And notice something interesting. That same cycle appears in action research. Action research also follows iterative loops. Observe, plan, act, reflect, adjust, repeat. This is one reason the relationship between scientific methodology and action research is so important. They share structural similarities. Both are learning systems, both evolve through cycles. However, scientific methodology often focuses on controlled environments. Both depend on reflection and evidence. Action research focuses on living systems. That difference becomes more important as we move into modern organizational research. And speaking of worldviews, let's move to the next slide. This slide introduces one of the deepest concepts in research philosophy, worldviews. A worldview is basically the lens through which we interpret reality. Different worldviews shape how people think about truth, knowledge, organizations, and science. One important thinker here is Immanuel Kant. Kant argued that humans do not experience reality directly in a purely objective way. Instead, the human mind helps organize experience. This idea transformed epistemology, which is the philosophy of knowledge. Later, philosopher Stafford Pepper proposed four major world hypotheses: formism, mechanism, organicism, contextualism. Now, let's simply simplify this fast. World views. World views. This slide gets to the heart of the presentation, the relationship between scientific methodology and action research. Traditionally, many people view these approaches as opposites. Scientific methodology was seen as objective and analytical. Action research was seen as subjective and participatory. It argues that both methodologies share common philosophical roots, but the document argues something much more nuanced. Both rely on cycles of analysis and synthesis. Both involve observation. Both involve interpretation. Both involve learning. Both involve refinement. One major figure here is Charles Sanders Peirce. Peirce introduced important ideas about inferential logic. He emphasized abductive reasoning. Now, most people know about induction and deduction, but abduction is slightly different. Abductive reasoning involves generating possible explanations for surprising observations. For example, imagine an organization suddenly experiences low employee morale. Researchers observe the problem. They begin asking, what might explain this? Is it leadership, communication, burnout, organizational culture, economic uncertainty? Abduction helps generate hypotheses. Then induction and deduction help test and refine those ideas. Both scientific methodology and action research rely on these reasoning processes. However, there is one major difference. Scientific methodology traditionally operates in closed systems. Researchers try to control variables and minimize environmental influence. Action research operates in open systems. Environmental factors are not removed. They are integrated into the inquiry process. This makes action research especially valuable for organizational change, leadership, education, healthcare, and social systems because real world systems are messy. Human systems are unpredictable. Organizations evolve. Cultures shift. External conditions change constantly. Action research embraces that complexity rather than trying to eliminate it. And honestly, this is one reason action research has become increasingly important in modern organizations. Now we move into systems thinking. Systems thinking is one of the most powerful intellectual frameworks of the modern era. Instead of studying the isolated parts separately, systems thinking studies relationships, interactions, feedback loops, and interdependency. Imagine a healthcare system. If hospital performance declines, the cause might not be a single factor. It could involve staffing, technology, policy, leadership, patient behavior, funding, communication, training. Everything is interconnected. Systems thinking recognizes that changing one part of a system can influence many other parts. This perspective became increasingly important during the 20th century. General system theory helped researchers understand organizations as living adaptive systems. Organizations interact continuously with their environments. They receive inputs, they process information, they adapt, they evolve. This shift away from rigid mechanistic thinking transformed management theory. Instead of treating organizations like machines, researchers began viewing them as dynamic social systems. And this connects directly to action research. Action research works extremely well within systems thinking because it recognizes contextual complexity. Researchers collaborate with participants. They study relationships, they observe patterns, they adapt interventions continuously. Systems thinking also emphasizes feedback loops. Feedback helps systems learn. Organizations receive information about performance, then they adapt. This similarity to biological evolution. Living systems survive by learning and adapting. Organizations do the same. And honestly, many of today's most successful companies are learning organizations. They continuously gather feedback, they innovate, they adapt, they learn from failure. That mindset is deeply connected to systems thinking and action research. This slide focuses on learning cycles and inferential logic. And this is extremely important because research here is not just about collecting data, it is about making meaning from information. Three major forms of reasoning are highlighted here: abduction, induction, deduction. Let's simplify them. Abduction asks, what could explain this? Induction asks, what patterns do we observe? Deduction asks, if this theory is true, what should happen next? Together, these reasoning methods form the engine of inquiry. Now, let's connect this to learning cycles. John Dewey emphasized experiential learning. People learn through experience and reflection. Einstein also discussed how surprising observation can stimulate new theories. Think about scientific breakthroughs. They often begin with anomalies. Something unexpected happens. Researchers become happens. Questions emerge, then inquiry begins. The same thing happens in organizations. A company experiences unexpected decline, a hospital experiences recurring problems, a school struggles with performance. Those surprising outcomes trigger inquiry. Action research then creates cycle of planning, action, observation, and reflection. Each cycle produces new understanding. Over time, knowledge deepens. This iterative process is incredibly powerful because it supports adaptation. Instead of assuming we already know the answer, we remain open to learning. And honestly, that mindset is critical in today's rapidly changing world. Technology changes quickly, organizations evolve rapidly, global conditions shift constantly. Rigid thinking becomes dangerous. Adaptive learning becomes essential. That is why learning cycle matter so much. Now we're connecting historical philosophy with modern systems thinking. This slide highlights several influential thinkers. Thomas Kuhn is particularly important. Kuhn introduced the idea of scientific revelations and paradigm shifts. According to Kuhn, science does not always progress gradually. Sometimes entire frameworks collapse and new paradigms emerge. For example, the transition from Newtonian physics and Einstein's relativity represented a paradigm shift. Similarly, organizations today often experience paradigm shifts. New technologies disrupt industries. New management philosophies replace older models. New social expectations transform institutions. Peers contributed pragmatic epistemology. He emphasized that knowledge grows through inquiry, experimentation, and reflection. Kant emphasized the role of human perception and cognition. Together, These thinkers help create modern understandings of inquiry and systems. One major theme here is the transition from reduction toward holism. Reductionism breaks systems into smaller parts. Holism studies the whole system and the relationship between parts. Modern organizations increasingly require holistic thinking. Why? Because isolated solutions often fail. For example, a company cannot improve performance simply by increasing productivity metrics if organizational culture is toxic. Systems interact. Human factors matter. Context matters. This realization strengthens the importance of system thinking and action research. This slide focuses on organizational systems. Modern organizations are incredibly complex. They involve technology, people, processes, leadership, culture, communication, feedback, innovation, external pressures. Researchers like Peter Senge emphasize the idea of learning organizations. A learning organization continuously improves by reflecting on experience and adapting behavior. This is incredibly important in today's environment. Companies that fail to adapt often disappear. Organizations that learn survive. Cybermetrics also influence systems thinking. Cybermetrics studies feedback, communication, and control within systems. Think about that thermostat. It continuously monitors temperature. When conditions change, it adjusts. Organizations function similarly. They monitor performance, they receive feedback, they adjust strategies. Action research fits naturally into this framework because it creates structured learning cycles. Researchers and participants work together. They diagnose problems, they implement actions, they reflect on outcomes, they refine approaches. This creates adaptive organizational learning. And honestly, many modern leadership models now emphasize these principles: collaboration, feedback, adaptability, system awareness, continuous learning. These ideas are becoming increasingly essential in a rapidly changing global environments. Now, let's look more closely at inquiry approaches themselves. The scientific method follows structured stages: observation, problem definition, hypothesis formation, experimentation, data analysis, generalization, application. This structure creates analytical rigor. It allows researchers to test ideas systematically, and this rigor is extremely valuable. Science has transformed medicine, engineering, technology, physics, biology, and countless other fields. However, action research approaches inquiry differently. Action research emphasizes participate inquiry. Participants are actively involved. The process becomes collaborative. Instead of researchers studying people from a distance, people become co-creators of knowledge. This distinction matters a lot in organizational and social contexts. Imagine trying to improve a workplace. A purely external analysis may miss important cultural realities. Employees possesses valuable, valuable experiential knowledge. Action research incorporates those voices. This creates richer understanding and often leads to stronger implementation. Another strength of action research is flexibility. If conditions change, the research process can adapt. That adaptability is crucial when dealing with complex systems. At the same time, scientific methodology provides strong analytical discipline. So rather than treating these approaches as enemies, many researchers now see them as complementary. Scientific rigor combined with participatory learning can create powerful research outcomes. This slide introduces complexity theory and nonlinear dynamics. Now, this may sound intimidating, but the core idea is actually simple. Complex systems are unpredictable. This is sometimes called the butterfly effect. Small changes can produce massive effect. For example, a small communication breakdown inside an organization can eventually create major organizational conflict. Similarly, a small innovation can completely transform an industry. Complex systems are nonlinear. That means outcomes are not always proportional to inputs. You cannot always predict results with perfect accuracy. This challenges traditional mechanistic thinking. All scientific models often assume predictability and control, but modern complexity theory recognizes uncertainty and emergence. Emergence means new patterns arise from interactions within systems. Think about social media. No single individual controls the entire system, yet massive trends emerge from millions of interactions. Organizations behave similarly. Culture emerges through countless daily interactions. This complexity makes action research especially valuable. Why? Because action research is adaptive. It allows continuous learning within changing environments. Now, this slide also mentions utopianism. Historically, many thinkers imagined ideal societies built through reason, science, and progress. However, history also teaches us that overly rigid and or simplistically models can become dangerous. This is why critical thinking matters. We must remain open to uncertainty, complexity, and adaptation. Modern system thinking encourage humility. No model perfect captures reality. Research must remain flexible and reflective. Now we move into organization knowledge creation. In today's economy, knowledge is one of the most valuable resources organizations possess. Companies compete through innovation, and innovation depends heavily on learning. Researchers Nonaka and Takuchi introduced the SECI model of knowledge creation. This model explains how tacit and explicit knowledge interact. Tacit knowledge is personal, experiential, and difficult to articulate. For example, an experienced nurse may intuitively recognize patient distress before measurable symptoms appear. That intuition represents tacit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is formalized. It can be documented, written, and shared. The SECI model includes four steps: socialization, externalization, combination, internalization. Together, these stages create continuous organizational learning. Action research aligns strongly with this model because it encourages reflection, participation, and collaborative learning. Organizations learn by integrating experiences, dialogue, experimentation, and reflection. This is why many innovative organizations prioritize learning cultures. Employees share ideas, teams collaborate, feedback loops exist, mistakes become learning opportunities. And honestly, this mindset is becoming more important than ever. The modern world changes rapidly. Organizations that cannot learn quickly often struggle to survive. This slide focuses specifically on the evolution of action research. Action research did not appear suddenly. It evolved gradually through centuries of philosophical and scientific development. Its roots stretch back to the Greek dialectic inquiry. Then scientific methodology introduced systematic observation and experimentation. Later, reflective inquiry and systems thinking expanded the framework. One of the most influential figures in action research was Kurt Lewin. Lewin argued that understanding social systems requires active participation. He famously said, if you want to truly understand something, try to change it. That statement captures the sense of action research. Action research combines inquiry with action. Researchers collaborate with participants to improve systems while simultaneously generating knowledge. This makes action research extremely practical. It's not just theoretical. It aims to create real-world improvement. Today, action research is used in education, healthcare leadership, community development, organizational change, public policy, and many other fields. Its popularity continues growing because modern problems are increasingly complex and interconnected. Traditional isolated analysis is often insufficient. Organizations need adaptive learning systems, and action research provides a framework for that. Now we arrive at the final content slide. This slide compares the strengths and limitations of action research and scientific methodology. Let's begin with action research. One major strength is contextual relevance. Action research works directly within real environments. It incorporates human experience, participation, and context. Another strength is flexibility. Researchers can adapt continuously. Action research also promotes collaboration and organizational learning. It often creates strong practical impact. However, action research also faces challenges because it operates in open systems. Maintaining strict analytical control can be difficult. Subjectivity and bias may influence interpretation. Results may be harder to generalize. Now, let's look at scientific methodology. Scientific methodology provides strong analytical rigor. Control experiments for objectivity. Structured procedures allow replication. This creates highly reliable scientific knowledge. However, scientific methodology also has limitations. Highly controlled environments may oversimplify real world complexity. Reductionism may ignore systemic relationships. Human participation and contextual meaning may receive less attention. So, which approach is better? Honestly, the answer depends on the problem. If researchers need highly controlled experimental precision, scientific methodology may be ideal. If researchers need adaptive, participatory learning within complex social systems, action research may be more effective. And increasingly, researchers are integrating both approaches. Analytical rigor combined with contextual learning can produce powerful results. That integration may represent the future of organizational and social research. As we conclude this lecture, let's step back and reflect on the larger picture. This journey through scientific methodology and action research is really a journey through the evolution of human understanding. From ancient Greek philosophy to modern systems thinking, humans have continuously searched for better ways to understand reality. We developed logic, we developed science, we developed experimentation, we developed systems thinking, and eventually we developed participatory approaches like action research. One of the biggest lessons from this entire discussion is that knowledge is not static. Knowledge evolves. Learning is iterative. Organizations evolve through reflection. Science evolves through inquiry. Societies evolve through adaptation. And individuals evolve through experience. Scientific methodology gave humanity extraordinary analytical tools. Action research expanded those tools into complex human systems. Together, these methodologies help us navigate uncertainty, complexity, and change. And honestly, that may be more important today than ever before. We live in rapidly changing world. Technology evolves quickly. Organizations face constant disruption. Global systems are interconnected. The ability to learn, adapt, reflect, and innovate has become essential. That is why these ideas matter far beyond academia. They matter for leadership, they matter for education, they matter for healthcare, they matter for organizations, they matter for communities, and they matter for the future of society itself. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found this video valuable, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with anyone interested in research, philosophy, organizational learning, systems thinking, or scientific inquiry. And I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you think organizations should rely more on scientific methodology or action research? Or do you believe the future lies in combining both approaches? Leave your thoughts and comments below. Thank you again for being here. Keep learning, keep questioning, keep reflecting, and never stop exploring new ways of understanding the world. I'll see you in the next lecture.